When I was rushed into surgery, nobody from my family came to the hospital. They all went to celebrate my cousin's birthday instead. But as I woke up in recovery, my phone lit up with a message from my cousin. "We need to talk. Urgently." Followed by 31 missed calls. I, 32M, woke up to the sterile smell of disinfectant and the rhythmic beeping of machines. My throat was raw, my abdomen felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it, and for a few seconds, I couldn't remember where I was or why everything hurt so badly. Then it came back in fragments. The excruciating pain that had doubled me over at work, the ambulance ride, the doctor's grave expression as he explained that my appendix had ruptured and I needed emergency surgery immediately. The recovery room was dim and quiet except for the medical equipment. I reached for my phone on the side table, my hand shaking from the anesthesia still working its way out of my system. The screen lit up, and I had to blink several times to focus. 31 missed calls. 27 text messages. All from my cousin Daniel. The most recent message read, "We need to talk. Urgently." I stared at the notification, trying to process it through the fog in my brain. Nothing from my parents. Nothing from my sister. Nothing from my aunt and uncle who lived 10 minutes from this hospital. Just Daniel, whose birthday party was tonight. The birthday party that apparently everyone had chosen to attend instead of coming to see if I survived surgery. The nurse came in to check my vitals and asked if I needed anything. I told her I was fine, though I wasn't sure that was true. She mentioned that the surgery had gone well, but that I'd been lucky. Another hour and the infection could have spread catastrophically. She said the doctor would be by soon and asked if my family was in the waiting room. I told her they'd be coming later, which was a lie, but I didn't want to explain that they were currently at a birthday celebration while I'd been sliced open on an operating table. After she left, I scrolled through Daniel's messages. The first few were casual, sent hours before my surgery, asking if I was still coming to his party tonight. Then there was a gap of several hours. Then the tone shifted dramatically. "Call me now. This is serious. Pick up your phone." The timestamps showed he'd been trying to reach me for the past 2 hours, right around when I would have been coming out of surgery. I didn't call him back. Instead, I opened the family group chat that my mother had created years ago, the one she used to coordinate dinners and holidays and share photos of the dog. The last message in it was from this morning. My sister asking what time everyone was meeting at the restaurant for Daniel's birthday dinner. My mother had responded with a time. My father had sent a thumbs-up emoji. My aunt had confirmed she and my uncle would be there. I had sent a message at 2 in the afternoon, right before the ambulance arrived, telling everyone that I was being taken to the hospital for emergency surgery and that my appendix had ruptured. I'd even included the name of the hospital. 17 people in that chat had read the message. Not one had responded. The doctor came by around 9. He explained the procedure, told me I'd need to stay overnight for observation, and mentioned that I'd been very fortunate. Ruptured appendixes were no joke, he said. Peritonitis could set in quickly. I'd need antibiotics and rest. He asked again about my family, and I told him they were on their way, which was another lie, but I was getting good at those. After he left, I finally listened to one of Daniel's voicemails. His voice was strange, tight, and panicked in a way I'd never heard before. He said he needed to talk to me about something that had happened at the restaurant. He said it was about the family. He said I needed to call him back immediately, that it was an emergency. An emergency. The word tasted bitter. I'd had an actual emergency today, and none of them had come. I didn't call him back. Instead, I started scrolling through social media, which was probably masochistic, but I couldn't help myself. My mother had posted photos from the restaurant. A long table full of people, birthday decorations, Daniel blowing out candles on an elaborate cake. Everyone was smiling. My sister had her arm around my aunt. My father was raising a glass and a toast. The caption read, "Celebrating our amazing Daniel. So blessed to have this family." I took a screenshot. I wasn't sure why yet, but some instinct told me I'd need it. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I declined the call and watched as he immediately tried again. And again. On the 4th attempt, I turned off my phone entirely and closed my eyes. Sleep came in uncomfortable waves. Every time I shifted position, the surgical site screamed in protest. Nurses came and went throughout the night, checking vitals and adjusting for bags. Around 3 in the morning, I turned my phone back on. 48 missed calls now. Messages from Daniel, my mother, my sister, my aunt. But I noticed something interesting. The first messages from everyone except Daniel had only started coming in around midnight, hours after the party would have ended. My mother's message was brief. "Honey, call me when you can. Hope you're doing okay." My sister's was similar. "Hey, heard you're in the hospital. Let me know you're all right." Nothing acknowledged that I'd told them hours before the surgery. Nothing apologized for not coming. It was as if they'd only just found out, which was impossible given that 17 people had read my message in the group chat. Daniel's messages were different, more frantic. "Please answer. This is about Mom and Dad. And your parents. Please." I spent the early morning hours thinking about my family. We'd always been close, or so I'd thought. Sunday dinners at my grandmother's house before she passed. Holiday gatherings. Birthday parties, obviously. I was the oldest grandchild, and Daniel was 2 years younger, and we'd grown up more like brothers than cousins. Our parents were siblings who'd stayed close into adulthood, buying houses in the same neighborhood, taking joint vacations. But there'd been cracks I'd ignored. Small things, like how my achievements were always downplayed while Daniel's were celebrated extensively. When I'd graduated top of my class in college, there'd been a small dinner. When Daniel had graduated middle of his class 2 years later, they'd thrown a massive party. When I'd gotten promoted to senior analyst, my father had said that was nice. When Daniel had gotten a job as a junior associate at a law firm, my mother had posted about it on social media for days. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was secure enough not to need validation. But lying in that hospital bed, alone, while they'd all been at his birthday party, I realized maybe it had mattered more than I'd admitted. The doctor cleared me to go home around 10 the next morning. I had prescriptions for antibiotics and pain medication, instructions for wound care, and orders to take it easy for at least 2 weeks. He asked if someone was picking me up. I told him I'd take an Uber, and he looked at me with something that might have been pity but didn't push the issue. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. I'd stopped checking it. The Uber driver helped me into my apartment and carried my small bag of belongings from the hospital. I tipped him extra and locked the door behind me. My apartment felt foreign, like I'd been gone for weeks instead of a single night. I swallowed some pain medication, collapsed onto my couch, and finally opened my messages. 63 missed calls, over 100 texts, and a new message in the family group chat from my mother. "Can everyone please come to our house tonight at 6? We need to have a family meeting. It's important." Daniel's most recent message, sent 20 minutes ago. "I know you're out of the hospital. I'm coming over. We need to talk before tonight." I was typing a response telling him not to come when my doorbell rang. Of course, he'd ignored my unstated preference for isolation. That was typical Daniel, bulldozing through boundaries because he'd never had to respect them. I opened the door and barely recognized him. His eyes were red and swollen, his hair uncombed, still wearing the same shirt from his birthday dinner in the photos. He looked like he hadn't slept. He pushed past me into the apartment, and the words started tumbling out before I could say anything. He said he was sorry. He said he'd had no idea I was in surgery. He said none of them had known until after dinner when my mother's friend, a nurse at my hospital, had coincidentally seen me in recovery and texted her. I cut him off and asked what he meant they hadn't known. I'd sent a message to the group chat. 17 people had read it. His face did something complicated. He pulled out his phone and showed me the family group chat. My message wasn't there. The last message visible was my sister asking about dinner plans, followed by the responses about timing. My emergency message had vanished. I grabbed my own phone and opened the chat. My message was still there on my end, sent at 2 in the afternoon, marked as read by everyone. But on his phone, it didn't exist. Someone had deleted it. Daniel sat down heavily on my couch and put his head in his hands. He said he'd figured it out during dinner. Our mothers had been acting strange all night, whispering to each other, checking their phones constantly. Around dessert, his mother had suddenly announced that she wasn't feeling well and they needed to leave early. His father had agreed immediately. My parents had exchanged a look and said they should probably go too. Daniel had been annoyed. It was his birthday and they were bailing before presents. But then his mother's phone had buzzed and she'd forgotten to hide the screen. He'd seen my mother's name and the message preview. The nurse friend saw him. He's fine. Out of surgery. He'd confronted them right there in the parking lot. Asked them what they were talking about. Who was out of surgery? And my mother had tried to deflect, but his mother had started crying and the whole thing had fallen apart. I sat there, pain medication making everything feel slightly unreal, and asked him what exactly had fallen apart. He said my mother had deleted my message from the group chat. She'd seen it, panicked, and used her phone to remove it before anyone else could see it. She'd told his mother immediately, and they'd agreed not to tell anyone else because it was Daniel's birthday, and they didn't want to ruin it. They decided that they would all go to the party, have a nice dinner, and then afterward they'd deal with my situation. I repeated the phrase back to him. My situation, my ruptured appendix and emergency surgery was a situation to be dealt with after birthday cake. He was crying now, saying he was sorry over and over, saying he'd never have gone if he'd known. None of them would have. But our mothers had made a choice and everyone else had just followed along because that was what we did in this family. We followed along. I asked him why he'd been calling so desperately if he'd only found out after dinner. He wiped his face and said that after they'd confronted our mothers in the parking lot, everything had exploded. His father had been furious. My father had been defensive. They'd all started screaming at each other right there in the restaurant parking lot. My mother had insisted she'd made a judgment call, that the surgery was already happening and there was nothing they could do anyway. So why ruin Daniel's birthday? His mother had agreed initially, but then gotten upset when she realized how bad it looked. The fight had gotten so heated that other people from the restaurant had come out to see what was happening. Someone had threatened to call the police. They'd all gotten in their cars and my parents had driven home while his parents had followed, still arguing. The fight had continued at my parents' house until almost 2 in the morning. Daniel said he'd been trying to reach me because he wanted to warn me before I talked to any of them. He said my mother was planning to control the narrative at this family meeting tonight, to make it seem like a misunderstanding or a technological error. He said I needed to know the truth before I walked into that room. I asked him what he wanted me to do with this information. He looked at me like I was crazy. He said I should be furious. I should confront them. I should make them apologize. I should do something. But I was tired and everything hurt, and I'd already started forming a different plan. I told Daniel to go home. He protested, but I insisted. I said I needed to rest, and I'd see everyone tonight at the family meeting. He left reluctantly, making me promise to call if I needed anything. After he left, I spent the afternoon thinking, and planning, and making a few phone calls. Update 1. The family meeting was supposed to be at 6, but I arrived at 5:45. My mother opened the door and immediately tried to hug me, asking how I was feeling, saying she'd been so worried. I stepped back and told her I was fine. Her face flickered with something, guilt, maybe, or frustration that I wasn't playing along. Everyone was already there. My father in his chair, my sister on the couch, my aunt and uncle in the dining room, chairs they'd pulled into the living room. Daniel standing in the corner, looking miserable. The scene was set for whatever performance my mother had planned. She started talking before I'd even sat down. She said there'd been a terrible misunderstanding. She said she'd never seen my message in the group chat, that it must have been a technological glitch. She said by the time they'd found out I was in surgery, it was already over and I was fine, so they decided not to disturb me. She said she hoped I understood. I asked her to show me her phone. The room went silent. She asked why I'd want to see her phone. I said I wanted to see the group chat, to see this technological glitch for myself. My father jumped in and said this was ridiculous, said I was being paranoid, said I was making a big deal out of nothing. I'd had surgery and I was fine and everyone was here now. So what was the problem? I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd taken. The one showing my message in the group chat, sent at 2 in the afternoon, marked as read by everyone. The one showing all their smiling faces at the restaurant, timestamp 8 at night. The one showing my mother's social media post about being blessed by family. I asked them to explain how they were blessed by family while I was alone in a hospital bed. My sister said I was being dramatic, said it was just bad timing, said these things happen. I said no, these things don't just happen. Someone makes them happen. Daniel stepped forward and told them to stop lying. He said he'd already told me everything. About my mother deleting the message. About their agreement to go to the party anyway. About all of it. My mother's face went pale and then red. She turned on Daniel and asked how he could betray her like this. She said she'd been trying to protect everyone. She said she'd made a judgment call as the family matriarch, and sometimes that meant making hard choices. I asked her what was hard about choosing between a birthday party and her son's emergency surgery. She didn't have an answer for that. My aunt started crying and apologizing. She said she'd gone along with it, but she'd felt terrible the whole time. She said she'd wanted to leave, but my mother had convinced her it would be fine. My uncle sat silently, staring at the floor. My father told me I was being ungrateful. He said they'd raised me and sacrificed for me, and I was throwing it all back in their faces over one mistake. He said family forgives family. I told him forgiveness requires remorse, and I wasn't seeing any. That's when I told them about the phone calls I'd made that afternoon. To my grandmother's lawyer, the one who'd handled her estate when she died. To the financial advisor who'd managed the trust fund she'd left for me and Daniel. The trust fund I'd never touched because my parents had told me it was for emergencies only, and I should save it for when I really needed it. Except my grandmother hadn't left a trust fund for me and Daniel. She'd left one for me. Just me. The oldest grandchild. And my parents had been managing it for years, telling me I couldn't access it yet, that there were restrictions. There weren't restrictions. I'd turned 25 7 years ago. The money had been mine since then. Over $300,000, growing with interest, sitting in an account I'd never known I had full access to. I asked my parents if this was another judgment call. My mother started talking very fast, saying they'd been protecting the money for me, saying they'd been making sure I didn't waste it, saying they'd planned to tell me eventually. I asked her when eventually was. After I'd paid off my student loans while she drove a new car? After I'd lived in a studio apartment while they'd renovated their kitchen? After I'd worked 2 jobs to save up for a down payment on a condo while they'd taken cruises to Alaska? The room was completely silent now. My sister asked quietly if grandmother had left her anything. I said no. Just me. Because I was the oldest. Because grandmother and I had been close. Because she'd wanted to make sure I had security. My sister's face crumpled, and she turned to our parents. She asked if they'd known. They didn't answer, which was answer enough. Daniel asked if there was money for him too. I said no. Our grandmother had been my father's mother. She'd left Daniel's family the house in Maine and some other assets. But the trust fund had been specific. For me, her oldest grandson. My aunt looked at my mother and asked how she could have done this. How she could have stolen from her own son. My mother insisted she hadn't stolen anything, that the money was still there, that she'd been planning to tell me. I asked her when. Next year? The year after? After she'd deleted how many more messages about how many more emergencies? My father stood up and told me to leave. He said if I was going to be disrespectful in their home, I could get out. I said I'd already called the lawyer and started the process to take full control of the trust. I said I'd also filed a complaint about the unauthorized management of my funds. I said I'd be moving forward with whatever legal options were available to me. My mother asked how I could do this to my family. I said she'd done it first. I walked out and didn't look back. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks. The legal process is moving slowly but moving. The lawyer says I have a strong case given the documentation of their management or mismanagement of the trust. They'd been taking administrative fees for years that weren't authorized. They'd also made some questionable investment decisions that benefited them indirectly. My sister called me 5 days after the meeting. She said she understood why I was angry, but that I was tearing the family apart. I told her the family had been torn apart long before I'd found out about the money. She didn't have a response to that, but she said our parents were devastated. I didn't respond to that. Daniel has been keeping me updated. Apparently, my parents and his parents aren't speaking anymore. His mother feels guilty for going along with the birthday party plan and has been apologizing to everyone. His father is furious at my father for the financial deception. The family group chat has been dissolved. There will be no joint Thanksgiving this year. My mother has tried to reach me dozens of times. My father sent one text telling me I was dead to him. I didn't respond to either. The money from the trust is now in my control. All of it. I paid off my student loans in one payment. I'm looking at houses. I scheduled the vacation to Japan I've been putting off for 5 years. And I opened a savings account that no one else can touch. My incision has healed well. The doctor says I'm recovering ahead of schedule. I've been working from home and taking walks in the evening. My coworkers sent flowers and cards. My best friend from college came to visit for a weekend. People who weren't related to me by blood showed up in ways my family never had. I think about that night in the hospital sometimes. About waking up alone after surgery. About seeing those party photos. About the choice my mother made to delete that message. She'd said she was protecting everyone. But really she'd been protecting the illusion. The illusion that we were a close family. That nothing was wrong. That we were blessed. The truth is messier. We were never as close as the photos suggested. And the cracks had been there all along. I'd just been too willing to ignore them. Daniel asked me yesterday if I'd ever forgive them. I told him I didn't know. Forgiveness isn't something I'm thinking about right now. Right now I'm thinking about building a life that doesn't require me to make myself smaller so others can feel bigger. My cousin still calls regularly. He says the family is pushing him to convince me to drop the legal case. He says he won't do it, but that he wants me to know what I'm up against. I appreciate the honesty. I've started seeing a therapist. She says family trauma is complicated. She says I'm allowed to be angry. She says healing isn't linear and I shouldn't rush it. I'm trying to take that advice. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what would have happened if that nurse hadn't coincidentally seen me. If they'd never found out about the surgery at all. If they'd just gone to the party and come home and never known I'd been alone in that hospital. I think they would have been fine with that. And that tells me everything I need to know. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe us for more such real life-based stories. Thanks in advance.